G'day, this is Chris Savage from RL Ministries in Australia, welcoming you to this session of the book of Ezekiel. I pray that it'll be of benefit to you and help you in your Christian growth. Thank you for coming along. So here we are, we're into session 37 now. This is a study produced by Dr. Arnold Fruchtenbaum of RL Ministries he's also the founder of RL Ministries in the US. Now, last session we just finished off with the Levites. Remember the Levites, because of their disobedience, they're now going to have a reduced role in the kingdom under the millennial law system. They're just going to be ministers in the sanctuary. They're going to be caretakers, is what the good word for them. They're going to be like caretakers. They won't be ministering within the Holy of Holies or within the holy place because of their past sins, and their past sins were that they assisted the nation of Israel and Judah in idol worship. They virtually led them astray. They became a stumbling block for the nation of Israel, for the house of Israel, because they were actually helping him in the idol worship. So God, part of God's judgment for them, they'll have no great role, no priestly role in the millennial kingdom. And so they have pretty much a diminished role in the kingdom. In the kingdom, they won't come near to God, which means that they won't be able to execute the office of priest to God, not in the inner court anyway, and can't come near the holy things or the holy place and all those sorts of things. So they'll have no function in the Holy of Holies either. So what they virtually will be just a caretaker of the temple. What does that mean? It means, well, there'll be door openers. There'll be, make sure all the work that the Zadokites need to do they'll help them, to assist them in those sorts of things. There'll be like the temple police also. So that's their diminished role. So if they have a diminished role, well, who's going to take over the role of priests in the kingdom? Well, we're going to see that now. We're going to see the duties of the sons of Zadok. And we're going to see, because of their past faithfulness, they're going to be given a very significant role in the kingdom. It says, this is verse 15, but the priests, the Levites, the sons of Zadok, had kept the charge of my sanctuary when the children of Israel went astray from me. So he's talking about this priestly line there. So we read about their past faithfulness in contrast to the Levites' past disobedience. Now, Ezekiel is dealing with a specific segment of the tribe of Levi, and these are called the sons of Zadok. Now, in 1 Samuel 2, 33 to 36, we read how God, through Samuel, prophesied that the house of Eli was to be deposed from the priesthood, and it was going to be replaced by a faithful priest. And that was finally fulfilled in 1 Kings 2, 26 to 27, when the last priest of the house of Eli was deposed. And then moving into 2 Samuel 8, verse 17, we read that Zadok became the priest under King David, but he was from a different segment of the tribe of Levi, different than the house of Eli. And in 2 Samuel 15, 24 to 29, we read also that he remained loyal to David when Absalom, David's son, revolted against him. And then in 2 Samuel 20, verse 25, we're told that he continued as the high priest under David after the revolt by Absalom. Then in 1 Kings 1, 8 and 32 to 39, we also read that Zadok was loyal to Solomon. And this is David's son. 1 Kings 2, 26 to 27 and 35, we now read how Abiathar, who was of the house of Eli, was deposed in verses 26 to 27, and Zadok was now appointed to be high priest by Solomon in verse 35. But then the line of Zadok is traced later on in 1 Chronicles 6, 1 to 13 and 50 to 53. Now, from subsequent history, we know that the Zadokites were deposed from the priesthood by a bad guy called Antiochus IV Epiphanes. And he was a Greek, and the Greeks then gave the priesthood over to Menelaus, who was actually a Benjamite. And later on, the priesthood was retained under the control of the Levites in the Sadducee party, but they were not Zadokites either. Now it's interesting also that the Essenes of Qumran, the Essenes of the Qumran community who wrote the Dead Sea Scrolls, they separated themselves from the temple service. Why? Because they would not sacrifice in the temple because it was under Sadducean control. The Essenes were a branch of the Pharisees, and they were looking forward to the restoration of the Zadokite line as predicted by Ezekiel the prophet. So these were the sons of Zadok, here we go, that kept the charge of my sanctuary when the children of Israel went astray from me. So they were faithful all along. Now, as God states in Ezekiel 44:15, the Zadokite segment of the tribe of Levi remained faithful during the days of Israel's apostasy. And so now, because of their past faithfulness, they'll be given a superior role in the temple work of the kingdom. We're going to see their duties in the second part of verse 15 and verse 15. They shall stand before me to offer unto me the fat and the blood, saith the Lord Jehovah. They shall enter into my sanctuary, and they shall come near unto my table to minister unto me, and they shall keep my charge. So now, in the carrying out of their functions as priests, first of all, they shall come near unto me to minister unto me. This means that these Zadokites they'll function in the Holy of Holies. And now, under Mosaic law, this was limited to only one high priest. But under millennial law, any Zadokite will be allowed to go in. Secondly, they shall stand before me to offer unto me the fat and the blood. They'll also be working, what this means is they'll also be working in the inner court. And third, they shall enter into my sanctuary. Now, this is the first room. Remember, we're going inner court, and then we go into the holy place. This is the holy place, the first room. And then he goes on to say, for the fourth thing is, they shall come near unto my table. Now, the word table here is a figure for the altar. And going back into chapter 40, verse 47, it was called the altar of sacrifice. That's chapter 40, verse 47. And then in chapter 41, verse 22, even the altar of incense is referred to as a table. Now, in Ezekiel 43, 13 to 29, Ezekiel 43, 13 to 29, where the altar of sacrifice was described, this is what the Zadokites will be involved with. They'll come near to partake of the sacrificial meat, and their purpose is to minister unto me. In contrast to the Levites, they shall keep my charge. The Levites didn't keep God's charge. So what we see here is that which was forbidden to the tribe of Levi as a whole will now be permitted to this one branch of the tribe, the Zadokites. They'll do the work in the inner court. They'll be sacrificing on the altar of sacrifice. They'll also be working in the holy place where the altar of incense is located. Now, notice here that there is no mention of a table of showbread or a menorah or lampstand as we see under the Mosaic system. They'll also be able to enter into the Holy of Holies. And remember also, there'll be no Ark of the Covenant there at that time, but the Shekinah glory, as we've already learned, he will be there. The Shekinah glory will be there, or it will be there. Now, where it says they shall come near unto my table, the word table here, we just did that, didn't we? Yes, we did. Okay. Did I just do that? I might be having a senior moment here. No, I should. Having a senior moment. Hang on. Just hang on a sec. Okay. So they're going to come near onto my table, which means that they're going to partake of the sacrificial meat, and their purpose now is to minister unto me, unto God, and this is in contrast to the Levites. Now, so that which is Deja vu. Okay, we're going to see their garments. It shall be that when they enter in at the gates of the inner court, they shall be clothed with linen. This is verses 17 to 19. They shall be clothed with linen garments, and no wool shall come upon them, while they minister in the gates of the inner court and within. They shall have linen tires upon their heads, and shall have linen breeches upon their loins. They shall not gird themselves with anything that causes sweat. And when they go forth into the outer court, even into the outer court to the people, they shall put off their garments wherein they minister, and lay them in the holy chambers. And they shall put on other garments, that they sanctify not the people with their garments. So here in verses 17 to 18, he now deals with the rules governing the inner court. It shall be that when they enter in at the gates of the inner court, in verse 17 it says they shall be clothed with linen garments. Now, linen garments are very light and clean in appearance, and they cause minimal perspiration. So here we have something now which was not also true under the Mosaic system. Sorry, it was also true under the Mosaic system, according to Exodus 39, 27 to 29. Exodus 39, 27 to 29, and Leviticus 6, verse 10, and Leviticus 16, verse 14. Sounds like an auctioneer, doesn't it? No wool shall come upon them while they minister in the gates of the inner court and within. So wool tends to cause more sweating while working than linen does. In verse 18, we read about their garments. They shall have linen tires upon their heads, linen breeches upon their loins. They shall not gird themselves with anything that causes sweat. Now, sweat is considered uncleanness in this context, and wool particularly causes that. This says linen tires. It's not tires as in tires. It's a little headpiece. In verse 19, we have the rule of the outer court. And he says that when the Zadokites go forth into the outer court, even into the outer court to the people, so this now is as far as the non-Levites could go. What he says now is that they shall put off their garments wherein they minister, and they shall lay them in the holy chambers. So, what's all this about? Well, these Zadokite priests are not allowed to go out beyond the inner court while dressed in their priestly garments. These had to be removed and placed in those chambers around the inner court. They then had to put on other garments before they could go out to the people. And what's the reason for this? Well, the reason being that they sanctify not the people with their garments. This was so that the sacred would not become mixed with the secular. And because of the principle that contact with a holy object can only be made by a holy people. So only the Zadokites were set apart to do this. Similar principle is found in Exodus 29:37 and Exodus 30, verse 29. So here we have a contrast with the Mosaic law as given in Haggai chapter 2, verse 10 to 13. Haggai 2, 10 to 13. In verses 20 to 22, we now see their conduct. This is the conduct of the Zadokites. Neither shall they shave their heads, nor suffer their locks to grow long. They shall only cut off the hair of their heads. Neither shall any of the priests drink wine when they enter into the inner court. Neither shall they take for their wives a widow, nor her that is put away. But they shall take virgins of the seed of the house of Israel, or a widow that is the widow of a priest. So this passage now outlines their specific conduct as priests. First thing we see in verse 20 concerning their hair, neither shall they shave their heads. So this is one extreme, shaving it all off. And this was also forbidden to the priests under the Mosaic law. in Leviticus 21:5, Leviticus 21:5, and Leviticus 21:10. Nor should they suffer their locks to grow long. It's the other extreme. So basically what he's saying here is, can't have any skinheads and can't have anybody with dreadlocks. So you can't have no hair and you can't have long hair. They shall only cut off the hair of their heads. So what they had to do was they had to maintain a medium length of hair and keep in balance between the two extremes. Then in verse 21, we have limitations concerning alcoholic beverages. And the prohibition here is, neither shall any of the priests drink wine. Now, if we were to stop there, we'd get the entirely wrong impression, right? When are they not to drink wine? It says when they enter into the inner court. So this passage is not teaching the total abstention for the priesthood, but only during the times when they are functioning in their priestly role. They must have full control of their senses at that time. Once their duties are finished for the day, then of course they are then free to partake of alcoholic beverages. However, they're not allowed to partake either before or during their priestly functions. Same thing was true under the Mosaic law found in Leviticus 10 verse 9. Leviticus 10 verse 9. Then in verse 22 we have their conduct concerning marriage. They are prohibited from taking a woman of certain types of status for a wife. These were widows or her that is put away, meaning divorcees. However, they were permitted to take virgins of the seed of the house of Israel. What that means is they're allowed to marry a virgin, but she had to be of the house of Israel. So they must marry a Jewish virgin. On the other hand, they could marry a woman who was the widow of a priest. They couldn't just marry any widow, but they could marry the widow of another priest. They're not allowed to marry just any widow. But if the woman is a widow of a priest, then another priest may marry her. This is the exception to that first rule. Here again, we have a distinction between the millennial and the Mosaic law. Under the law of Moses, these rules applied only to the high priest. But now under the millennial law, this rule applies to every Zadokite priest. In verses 23 to 24, we now see their responsibilities. And they shall teach my people the difference between the holy and the common, and cause them to discern between the unclean and the clean. And in a controversy they shall stand to judge. According to mine ordinances shall they judge it. They shall keep my laws and my statutes in all my appointed feasts, and they shall hallow my Sabbaths. So their first responsibility is that they shall teach my people in verse 23. The Zadokites are to be the teachers of Israel, instructing them in the difference between the holy and the common, and then also cause them to discern between the unclean and the clean. Levites had a similar responsibility under the Mosaic law, according to Leviticus 10 verse 10 and Deuteronomy 33 8 to 10 and Malachi 2 verse 7. Their second responsibility is to judge, and we find this in verse 24. They shall judge, so their function will be in a controversy, they shall stand to judge. And the basis of their judgment will be according to mine ordinances. So that is according to Deuteronomy 17, verse 8 to 13, Deuteronomy 19, verse 15 to 20, and Deuteronomy 21, verse 5. Mosaic priests had a very similar role as judges as well. Their third responsibility, also in verse 24, is, and they shall keep my laws and my statutes in all of my appointed feasts, and they shall hallow my Sabbath. So they have to take oversight virtually of all temple ritual. So there are three major responsibilities, which is the Zadokites only, are to teach, to judge, and to oversee the temple rituals. The other Levites have none of these responsibilities. Now in verses 25 to 27, we see their separation. And they shall go in to no dead person to defile themselves, but for a father, or for mother, or for son, or for daughter, for brother, or for sister that hath had no husband, they may defile themselves. And after he is cleansed, they shall reckon unto him 7 days. And in the day that he goeth into the sanctuary, into the inner court, to minister in the sanctuary, he shall offer his sin offering, saith the Lord Jehovah. So here, in verse 25, we have instruction concerning defilement. The millennial law is, they shall go in to no dead person to defile themselves, with certain exceptions. They were not to touch a dead body. For certain close family who die, they may defile themselves, but these are the exceptions: father, mother, son, daughter, brother, or unmarried sister. In the law of Moses, there were similar laws for the common priests, according to Leviticus 21, verses 1 to 3. That's Leviticus 21, 1 to 3. But no exceptions were made under the Mosaic law for the high priest. And that was according to Leviticus 21, verse 11. He had no exceptions. So once again, we have things which are a bit different here from the Mosaic system. Notice that these verses also show that there's going to be death in the Messianic kingdom, because we're just talking about being defiled by dead people. Now, according to Isaiah 65, verse 20, Isaiah 65, 20, it says that death in the kingdom will be for unbelievers only. And so Isaiah 65, 20 says that when a man dies, he's going to die at age 100, and these are only unbelievers who die at that age. Isaiah 65, 20, read it for yourself. Now, if it is necessary for a priest to defile himself on behalf of a close relative, then in verse 26 we deal with the period of cleansing. So after he's cleansed, that is from the defilement of touching a dead body, they shall reckon unto him 7 days. So he'll have to undergo a period of 7 days of ritual cleansing. And then in verse 27, we have the timing and the offering for his cleansing. It says, in the day that he goeth into the inner court to minister in the sanctuary. So that is after the 7 days of waiting to fulfill the cleansing is finished, he's now again allowed to go into the inner court and the temple to fulfill his job. But on that day, he needs to give an offering, and he's going to offer for his sin. He shall offer for his sin offering. Now, this too is something unique on the millennial law. We see in verses 28 to 31, we're going to see that they have an inheritance here. It says here, and they shall have an inheritance. I am their inheritance, and you shall give them no possession in Israel. I am their possession. They shall eat the meal offering and the sin offering and the trespass offering, and every devoted thing in Israel shall be theirs. Verse 30. And the first of all, the first fruits of everything, and every oblation of everything, of all your oblations, shall be for the priests. You shall also give unto the priests the first of your dough, not money, but floury stuff, to cause a blessing to rest on thy house. The priest shall not eat of anything that dies of itself or is torn, whether it be bird or beast. So Ezekiel now concludes his discussion on the sons of Zadok by telling us what their inheritance is. And in verse 28, we see that their inheritance is the service of God. I am their inheritance. This is God speaking. I am their inheritance, and you shall give them no possession in Israel. I am their possession. In other words, their priesthood is their inheritance. And this was also true for the Levites under the Mosaic law in Numbers 18, verse 20, and Deuteronomy 10, verses 8 to 9, and Deuteronomy 18, verse 1. Then in verse 29, he deals with the portions of the sacrifices that they shall eat. They get to partake of the meal offering. Same thing under the Mosaic law in Leviticus chapter 2, verses 1 to 3. And also the sin offering, which is also true under the Mosaic law in Leviticus 6, 24 to 30. And the trespass offering, also true under Mosaic law in Leviticus 7, verses 1 to 7. Every devoted thing in Israel shall be theirs. You know, in Hebrew, the word kerem, C-H-E-R-E-M, herem, for devoted means that which is devoted. It means that it is used especially in reference to the firstborn of animals and to fields. And this was true under the Mosaic law in Exodus 22, verse 30, Leviticus 27, verse 21, and Numbers 18, 14. They're there on your screen. Now, in verse 30, he deals with the donations to the priesthood. The first of all, the first fruits of everything is theirs. So the Jews in general are now told that they must give the first fruits of their increase to the priests, because God says it belongs to the priesthood. It's going to be treated like a donation to the priesthood, like support. Same thing was also spelled out under Moses in Exodus 23:19 and Exodus 34:26. Exodus 23:19, Exodus 34:26, and Numbers 18, verse 13, Numbers 18:13, and Deuteronomy 18, verse 4. Deuteronomy 18:4. He goes on to say, and every oblation of everything, of all your oblations, shall be for the priests. This was also true under the law in Numbers 18, 19, and 26. Numbers 18, 19, and 26. You shall also give unto the priests the first of your dough. This is also true of Numbers 15, 19 to 21. Numbers 15, 19 to 21. Now, the results for obedience to these things will be to cause a blessing to rest on thy house. So by giving their first fruits by way of donations to the priests, they would guarantee blessings from God. So this is something that is emphasized in Proverbs 3, 9 to 10, and Malachi 3, verse 10. Malachi 3, verse 10, and Proverbs 3, 9 to 10. Now here's an image of the Millennial Mount. You'll notice here that all the dimensions are in miles. So we're gonna talk about miles. Miles were those things we used to have years ago. We're now in kilometers. I'll give you some comparisons. So that's just the Temple Mount, which we see there with the temple, with the city of Jerusalem, and areas for dwellings. Okay, let's go. Just verse 31, just to finish off the last section. The priest shall not eat of anything that dies of itself or that is torn, whether it be bird or beast. To be torn means to be attacked by a wild animal. We have similar laws, or similar laws can be found in Leviticus 7:24, Leviticus 7:24, Leviticus 17:15, 17:15, Leviticus 22:8, Deuteronomy 14:21. Now we come to the holy oblation. We find this in chapter 45, verses 1 to 8. Now, this holy oblation refers to the millennial mountain of Jehovah's house, which we talked about back in chapter 40, verses 1 to 4. We did a lot of detail on that. Now, as we mentioned back then, this will become the highest mountain in the whole world during the kingdom. And somewhere in this mountain will stand the millennial temple and the millennial city of Jerusalem. In chapter 40, verses 1 to 4, we noted back then that Ezekiel did see the skyline of the new city of Jerusalem out on the southern end of the plateau on top of this mountain. What Ezekiel now does in this passage is to give us details of the layout of this plateau top of the mountain. So we're going to get a picture of what it will actually look like from what is to be built on it and the way it's going to be laid out. Now just remember, this is not the tribulation temple, all right? This is the millennial temple, millennial mount. He's going to add some more details when we get to chapter 48, verses 8 to 22. And that diagram there, I'll give you another one on the end of your notes there. You can follow along better with what we're going to talk about here. Okay, so we have the portion of the Zadokite priests in verses 1 to 4. Moreover, when you shall divide by lot the land for inheritance, you shall offer an oblation unto Jehovah, holy portion of the land. The length shall be the length of 25,000 reeds, and the breadth shall be 10,000. It shall be holy in all the border thereof round about. Of this there shall be for the holy place 500 in length by 500 in breadth, square round about, and 50 cubits for the suburbs thereof round about. And of this measure shalt thou measure a length of 25,000 and a breadth of 10,000, and in it shall be the sanctuary which is most holy. It is a holy portion of the land. It shall be for the priests, the ministers of the sanctuary that come near to minister unto Jehovah, and it shall be a place for their houses and a holy place for the sanctuary. So now in dealing with this holy oblation in verses 1 to 8, Ezekiel first of all deals with the portion allotted to the Zadokite priests in verses 1 to 4. In verse 1, he talks about the future division of the land. Moreover, when you shall divide by lot the land for inheritance. The millennial Israel is to be subdivided by lot, same thing that we saw back in Joshua 13:6. Joshua 13:6. The difference is this. In Joshua, the lot was cast to see which tribe would receive which portion of the land. In the case of the millennial Israel, the tribal portions have already been determined, as we're going to see when we get down to chapter 47, verse 13, to chapter 48, verse 30. So this lot that we're seeing here must be for the dividing up of each tribal territory to its families. The casting of lots in Joshua was to determine the apportioning of the land. In the millennium, the tribal portions have already been set. What has not been determined is which families will settle in which portions of each tribal allotment. So that is what the lots will be cast for in determining this in the kingdom. Then he says, you shall offer an oblation unto Jehovah. The Hebrew word truma, T-R-U, there it is on the screen, for oblation means a heave offering, which was like a levy or a compulsory contribution. So a section of the land is to be turned over to be devoted to the Lord and not to be owned by any particular tribe. And this oblation, he says, is to be a holy portion of the land. The length of it is going to be 25,000 reeds, keeping in mind that when we were doing the lengths back earlier on, a reed is around about 3.15 meters, or if you're in feet and inches, it's 10 feet 4 inches, approximately. So, so 25,000 reeds would be like 76 kilometers or approximately 50 miles in length. The breadth is 10,000 reeds, which would make it 32 kilometers or about 20 miles across. So that's what those images, those diagrams are good for. So this northern portion of the mountain is now to be turned over to the Zadokites. It's measuring 50 miles in length by 20 miles in width. Now, these measurements are in reeds, not in cubits. Some translations actually have it in cubits, but it's actually in reeds. Chapter 42, verse 16 makes it clear that Ezekiel is using reeds, not cubits. Now, this is the northern portion of the millennial mountain of Jehovah. It's north side. The entire plateau on the top measures 76 by 76 kilometers or 50 by 50 miles. But this northern portion takes in 50 by 20 miles of it. It shall be holy, it goes on to say here, it shall be holy in all the border thereof round about. So this is because this northern section will have standing within it the millennial temple. That's why it's going to be holy in the border round about. Then in verse 2, he confirms that this is the section where the temple is to be. The measurement of the temple compound is what he starts out with here. After this, there shall be for the holy place 500 in length by 500 in breadth, squared round about. Again, this measurement is in reeds, so we're looking at approximately 1 mile squared, 5,200 feet. A mile is 5,280 feet, so it's around about 1 mile square approximately. The temple compound itself is going to be almost a mile square, and sitting within this northern portion of this mountaintop plateau, which measures 50 by 20 miles. This is the northern section. So what he's saying in this verse is a summary of what he has already detailed back in chapter 42, verses 15 to 20. Chapter 42, 15 to 20. And there we clearly saw that the unit of measurement was the reed. Now he goes on to say that there'll be 50 cubits for the suburbs round about. So this refers to an open space, 26.5 meters or 87.5 feet. He's making the point here that surrounding the outer wall of the temple compound, there'll be an open space of 26.5 meters or 87 feet. Purpose of this is to separate the compound from the dwelling places of the priests. It's going to serve like a green belt, if you like, between the sacred and the secular. In verse 3, he says more about this northern section. An area of 25,000 by 10,000 reeds, that's 50 miles by 20 miles, is to be allocated, so that in it shall be the sanctuary which is most holy. So the whole temple compound is most holy. And the picture here is that this entire northern section is going to be as holy as the actual Holy of Holies within the temple itself. In verse 4, he tells us that this northern area is for the Zadokites. Its status is, it is a holy portion of the land. Who will possess it? It shall be for the priests, the ministers of the sanctuary that come near to minister unto Jehovah. Sorry, just got distracted there. From earlier passages, we learned that these are clearly the Zadokites. So, what can we say? This northern section of the millennial mountain of Jehovah's house is going to be the place for the houses where the sons of the Zadokites will live. These priestly homes are going to be separated from the temple compound by a 50 cubit open space, 26 meters, 87 foot of green belt, if you like, which we saw in verse 2. There's going to be a holy portion for the sanctuary, and the millennial temple will sit precisely in the center of this northern section. And it's in its entirety, the temple compound will measure approximately 1 mile square. Plus we'll have that 50 cubit open space all around it as well. And then in chapter 45, verse 5, we see the portion for the other Levites. These were the ones with the caretakers. And 25,000 in length and 10,000 in breadth shall be unto the Levites, the ministers of the house, for a possession unto themselves for 20 chambers. Now, this next section now sits south of the area which we've just looked at, and it forms the central area of the plateau. It is also to be 25,000 reeds in length and 10,000 reeds in breadth, so it's 50 miles by 20 miles approximately. What's the purpose of this central section? Well, it shall be for the Levites, the ministers of the house. So these are the caretakers of the temple compound as we know it. And they'll have this section of the mountain of the house of Jehovah for a possession unto themselves. So this is where they will live in place of the Levitical cities provided under the Mosaic law. Since the Levites had no territory of their own in the land under the law, all the other tribes were instructed to set aside certain cities within their tribal district where the Levites could live. These were known as Levitical cities, and this was commanded by Moses in Numbers 35, 1-8, and it was fulfilled in Joshua 21, 1-42. But in the millennium, this system is going to be changed. There'll be no Levitical cities within the various tribal territories. Instead, the non-Zadokite Levites are going to live in this 50 by 20 mile central section of the millennial mountain of Jehovah's house. Ezekiel also mentions here that there will be 20 chambers there. Now, this probably indicates that at the extreme northern end of this central section connecting to the territory of the Zadokites will be 20 chambers built for the Levites. So in this way, those whose turn it is to function as caretakers would use these chambers as temporary dwellings, because remember, they would not be allowed or not permitted to live in the Zadokite territory since the temple is there. So these 20 chambers will probably sit in the northern border of the Levites' holding and be used as places of temporary dwellings and storage while they're fulfilling their function as caretakers. Because remember, 50 miles is a long way to walk every day, you know, especially if you live down towards the ends. So from these chambers, they'll travel into the Zadokite territory where the temple is in order to fulfill their daily tasks there. And by using these chambers on their northern border, they'll be near enough to get there, but still not violate the area belonging exclusively to the Zadokites. And then in 45 verse 6, we now see a portion for Israel. And you shall appoint the possession of the city 5,000 broad and 25,000 long, side by side with the oblation of the holy portion. It shall be for the whole house of Israel. So in this section, he says, will be the possession of the city. This is the city of Jerusalem. The city of Jerusalem in the millennium is going to be located in the southern segment of the mountain of Jehovah's house. The measurement is 5,000 reeds, 10 miles approximately wide, and 25,000 reeds, 50 miles approximately long. Now, side by side with the oblation of the holy portion. So the length here parallels that of the northern and central sections. Purpose of this southern section is for the whole house of Israel. So what does this mean? It means that they're not all living there because they have their tribal allotments. So what this means is members from all tribes will be found living in this southern area. It will not belong to any particular tribe. Anyone can live in that area. In verses 7-8, we see the portion for the prince. And whatsoever is for the prince shall be on the one side and on the other side of the holy oblation and of the possession of the city, in front of the holy oblation and in front of the possession of the city, on the west side westward, and the east side eastward, and in length answerable unto one of the portions, from the west border unto the east border. In the land it shall be to him for a possession in Israel, and my princes shall no more oppress my people, but they shall give the land to the house of Israel according to their tribes. Now, Ezekiel now concludes this section by telling us about a portion of the mountain which belonged to the prince. We've previously identified the prince as the resurrected King David. Now, verses 7 to the first part of 8 deal with the actual possession. Whatsoever is for the prince, that is for King David, is positioned on the one side and on the other side of the Holy Oblation. This is emphasizing the northern section, right? Because that's where the Holy Oblation is. And of the possession of the city, which emphasizes the southern section. And then he mentioned it is in front of the Holy Oblation and in front of the possession of the city. On the west side westward, east side eastward, and in length answerable unto one of the portions, from the west border onto the east border. So the area he's describing here is the length of a tribal portion from east to west. He says, in the land it shall be to him for a possession in Israel. This means it will be a private possession belonging to King David and his sons. Now, putting all this information together from verses 7 and 8, the prince's portion, David's portion, lies on both the east and west sides of the Holy Oblation. So the Holy Oblation, which we said measures 50 by 50 miles, this is the millennial mountain of Jehovah's house, will be in the center of the land of Israel. Then on the west side of the mountain and running all the way to the border, which in this case will be the Mediterranean Sea, and on the east side going all the way to the eastern border, which will be the Jordan River, both sides will be the portion belonging to the prince, which will be King David. This means the northern and southern borders would then be equivalent to the northern and southern borders of the Holy Oblation, while the eastern and western borders will be the same as those of Judah on the north of the Holy Oblation and Benjamin on the south of the Holy Oblation. We're going to talk about those tribal allotments later on. The picture is that the portion of the prince is situated on the east and west sides of this special mountain 50 mile by 50 mile. Western border, Mediterranean Sea, eastern border, Jordan River. To the north, the tribe of Judah, the south, tribe of Benjamin. But the prince will not actually own the actual Holy Oblation itself, only the territory on both sides. So he'll actually have two separate land holdings. Western land holding is the eastern border of the Holy Oblation, eastern land, western border of the Holy Oblation. Have a look at the diagram. It makes sense. Now, in second part of verse 8, he tells us what the results of the prince receiving his own holy portion of the land are going to be. My princes shall no more oppress my people. Now, because the princes, the leaders in the past will have plenty of land for in the past they used to extract land from the people. Because the princes here will have plenty of land for themselves, they'll not have to confiscate land belonging to other people. But they shall give the land to the house of Israel according to their tribes. So that portion of the land which is not taken up by the Holy Oblation or owned by the prince will be then divided amongst the 12 tribes, the various tribes. And the details we're going to see in chapter 47 to 48. That's just to refresh your mind again, 50 mile by 50 mile. We see northern section is 50 mile by 20 mile where the 1 mile temple is. Southern section, Jehovah Shema, that's the city. All right, you got the picture. Now, what's the message to the princes of Israel? Verses 9 to 12. Thus says the Lord Jehovah, let it suffice you, O princes of Israel. Remove violence and spoil and execute justice and righteousness. Take away your exactions from my people, saith the Lord Jehovah. You shall have just balances and a just ephah and a just bath. The ephah and the bath shall be of one measure, that the bath may contain the 10th part of a homer, the ephah the 10th part of a homer. The measure thereof shall be after the homer. And the shekel shall be 20 gerahs, 20 shekels, 5 and 20 shekels, 15 shekels shall be your money. Now, here we have a message to the princes of Israel, and in verse 9 we find it is a message to Ezekiel's contemporaries. Let it suffice you, O princes of Israel. So it's a message to the then present princes of Israel. They are to remove violence and spoil and execute justice and righteousness. And they are to take away your exactions from God's people. As we found before, the future has its application to the present. So in light of the righteousness of Israel's future princes, how then should Israel's present princes act? They should act in the same way now, righteously. That will mean doing these three things. Remove violence and spoil. Second, execute justice and righteousness. And third, take away your exactions from my people. Now, having said this, giving the message to Ezekiel's contemporaries, he now shows what their future righteousness is now going to be like. It is best determined by the fact that it will be characterized by the use of just weights and measures in verses 10 to 12. In verse 10 he says, they shall have just balances and a just ephah. The ephah was a dry measure. 10 ephahs made up 1 homer, which is about 9 gallons. I can't convert into liters. 9 gallons. Secondly, they were to have a just bath. The bath is a liquid measure. It's holding the same volume as the ephah, about 9 gallons. And then 1 hin was 1/6 of a bath. This same importance, or this same emphasis on the importance of using just balances as a measure of righteousness is provided in Leviticus 19, 35 to 36, and Deuteronomy 25, 13 to 16, also found in Proverbs 11, verse 1, and Proverbs 20, verse 10. Although this was the emphasis, in the past there had been consistent disobedience. 2 examples are brought out in Amos 8:5 and Micah 6:10 to 12. So in verse 10, they'll have just balances. In verse 11, he spells out what their measure is. The ephah and the bath shall be 1 measure. So both the dry and liquid measures will have the same volume of about 9 gallons. But the bath may contain the 10th part of a homer and the ephah, the same. What he's saying is these measures have to be the same because they're equal to each other. Now the homer was both a dry and a liquid measure, where 1 homer equals 30 seahs. Now, you're not being examined in this, okay? So this becomes the basis of the new economy. The measure thereof shall be after the homer. The homer in the future will become the foundation of the Messianic kingdom economy. In verse 12, we have the coin. What sort of coins they're going to be using? The coinage. First of all, by weight, the shekel shall be 20 gerahs, which would make it 0.4 of an ounce or 4/10 of an ounce. The maneh would be equivalent to 60 shekels. So 60 shekels equals 1 maneh. Now, there are going to be 3 different denominations of the shekel coin minted in the kingdom. There'll be a 20 shekel coin, a 25 shekel coin, and a 15 shekel coin. And one of each will make a total of 60 shekels, which will equal 1 maneh. So we're going to have cash in the kingdom. Thank you for coming along. Study hard and grow strong.